Welcome to another edition of Chalk or Not. This week we're talking about UFC Baku, which has a solid 12-fight card, but only 7 of these fighters have been considered chalk in terms of my definition, which is anything that is minus 185 or wider, and 7 of these 12 fights fit that category. So we'll talk about it here and let you guys know which spots you should be parlaying, playing straight, or just trying to avoid altogether. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First matchup up, I believe, is the either first or second fight of the night between Ulanbekov, who comes in at minus 450, going up against Maksum. Now, I think that this is a spot that Ulanbekov can continue to show his dominance that he's been showing over his last 3 fights where he has a solid winning streak, but it would be nice to see him a little bit more active so he could get that much closer to a title shot, something he is more than capable of achieving and possibly even winning, considering how good his wrestling normally comes to be. And I think that will be challenged here against Maksum, but I think he has the better gas tank. I think he's a slightly better striker, not by a whole lot, but enough to be competitive there if he's forced to strike with Maksum for large periods of time. But I think ultimately he's going to be able to pull away in this matchup, especially in the second and third rounds, where he starts landing takedowns and grinding Maksum out. At minus 450, I do not mind Ulanbekov as a parlay piece, thus I'll have to consider him to be chalk worthy. The second spot here we're going to be talking about is Alekseeva, who comes in at minus 255, who goes up against Sygula, who comes in and looking to pull off her first UFC victory. Now, we haven't seen Alekseeva in a long time now. She was actually suspended after her October 2023 matchup against Mullins, and she's been on the sidelines ever since, and now here she is making her return. Alekseeva, in my opinion, is kind of like a poor woman's Macy Chiasson, who often leans on her physicality and her grappling to try to wear opponents down up against the cage, try to drag them to the mat, and try to do maximum damage from there. And I think she'll be successful in doing that here against Sygula, but she will be dealing with some offense off of Sygula's back that maybe she's able to catch Alekseeva in an armbar or something like that. And that's where it's kind of concerning for me. I don't think Alekseeva is that good of a fighter. Neither is Sygula. So it's tough to fully trust a fighter, no matter the discrepancy between the two. I don't want to call them shitty fighters, but low-level fighters. That's why it's hard for me to trust a minus 255 favorite at the skill level that Alekseeva brings to the table. To me, the under 2.5 at plus money is kind of whispering in my ear, as I think both these women are capable of either finding a submission or a TKO, which is what I think is going to happen here with Alekseeva. But I'm going to put her in the not chalk-worthy category, as I do not think she's that good of a fighter. Next up, Mullins coming in at minus 275 as she rematches Zheleznyakova. This is a rematch of a fight that took place back in November of 2023 under the Aries FC banner. And that night, Mullins got her nose bloodied a little bit, but she quickly got the takedown after that and was able to dominate Zheleznyakova from that top position. And just as we saw in Zheleznyakova last matchup against Eileen Perez, that seems to still be a little bit of an issue in her game, and Mullins will bring the same amount of tenacity and pressure with the grappling just as Eileen Perez did, and I think Mullins can replicate the result that she had in the first matchup with Zheleznyakova. I like Mullins by TKO if I'm being honest, but I think at minus 275 she's more than worthy of being considered a chalk worthy spot. All right, next up, we got Elliott coming in at minus 515, going up against Sygula. Intriguing matchup here. You know, Elliott's a guy that's really rounded out his game, gone from being a desperation grappler to now throwing a little bit more volume in the striking realm, showcasing good cardio as well, and the ability to go 15 minutes when he needs to so he can outpoint his opponents to get the win. Last time around, we saw him go 1-1 into the third round against Basil Hafez, and then eventually find that finish in the opening seconds of that third round. Ko is a decent striker and is formerly known as Korean Tyson for a reason, as he's been able to knock out 7 of his 11 opponents, and it goes to show what kind of power he can bring to the table. His takedown defense does not look all that bad either, and if he's forcing Elliott to strike with him for 15 minutes, this could definitely play out a lot closer than minus 515 indicates. You're talking close to somewhere between 80 and 85% indicated for Elliott, which I don't think is accurate. We saw Hafez have some solid striking success against Elliott, and I think Cole might be a slightly better striker than Hafez. So this could definitely be competitive. I'm still picking Elliott to win. I think he'll have higher output, higher volume, and have a little bit of success with his grappling, but I think Cole will make this much more of a sweat than a minus 515 indicates. Thus, I got to put Elliott in the not chalk-worthy category. Next up, Mohamed Naimov coming in at minus 240, going up against Bogdan Grad, who I think is a solid underdog. Grad's issue in the past, or at least what people are pointing to, has been his durability. But, as a much taller, much longer, much bigger Tom Noland, who was able to finish Bogdan Grad back in 2023. But since then, Grad has gone down a division and has picked up 4 straight victories, and also shows that he can go out there and take some shots now and still apply his pressure-heavy game. And Naimov might be successful with some big shots of his own, but we know he doesn't do well when he's the one being pressured. And Grad is definitely going to be keeping him on his back foot for the majority of this matchup, and I think that gives Grad a pretty damn good shot of winning this fight by keeping Naimov pinned against the cage, looking for takedowns, or constantly working out of bad spots so that he can keep Naimov on the defensive. I think Grad can more than likely get it finished later on in this fight, but even if it ends up hitting the scorecards, this could end up looking more like a 50-50 fight. I don't understand the hype on Naimov, but I think this weekend we'll see that his ceiling might not be above what Bogdan Grad can bring to the table. Thus, I'm going to go Naimov as not chalk-worthy in this fight. Next up, we got Nazim Sadykhov coming in at a mind-blowing minus 440, going up against a very tough Nicholas Motta, who's streaking now on a 2-fight winning streak, one of those being a knockout victory over the aforementioned Tom Noland, and then last time around going out there and slinging leather against a very hard-hitting Mahashate, and then clean sweeping him on the scorecards there, hurting him numerous times in that matchup. Now, Sadykhov is a guy that's kind of gotten away with a few controversial spots, maybe not controversial, but few weird bounces going his way with doctor stoppages and hurting his opponent very badly and getting a 10-8 round. But I think that one thing we often see in his fights is they're quite competitive. There are fights where he's down on the scorecards, but his power ends up bailing him out of those spots. And he's going to have to lean on that heavily here against Motta, because if this ends up being a straight-up striking battle and he's unable to finish Motta, this will definitely look much closer than minus 440. I think getting Motta at plus 365 is a crazy line and worthy of being considered, especially where we've seen him pull off big upsets in the past. He's a huge underdog against Nicholas Motta, found himself as an underdog against Mahashate, and now here he once again finds himself as a big underdog. We know he can compete and pull off the upset, and I think he can do that here against Sadykhov, a guy that I still have some question marks about, and a guy, in my opinion, that is not worth that 80% indicated, especially against a striker who might be able to touch him up a little bit better on the feet. So I'm going to go Motta, and thus I'm going to have to put Sadykhov in the not chalk-worthy category. All right, the final one that we're going to be talking about here is in the heavyweight division, as we have Curtis Razor Blaydes going up against Rizvan Kuniev. You got minus 265 on the former title challenger, Curtis Blaydes. Now, this is a type of matchup where Blaydes can be comfortable. This is a type of matchup where Blaydes does not have to worry too much about the knockout power coming back his way. I would not classify Kuniev as one of those power punchers that has ultimately been the kryptonite in Blaydes' game. This is not a Sergey Pavlovich type of puncher, a Francis Ngannou type puncher, or even a Derek Lewis type puncher. This is a guy that, builds up to his knockouts by wearing his opponents down, especially with his wrestling and his clinch game. But that's going to be hard for him to do against a guy like Blaydes, who often is successful with that type of approach against his opponents. So I'm expecting Blaydes to put Kuniev through the ringer, and I think that will either lead to a late stoppage here for Blaydes or a win on the scorecards. But either way, I think he dominates this matchup, and something to consider, when they were originally scheduled to fight each other back in March or April, Blaydes found himself as a minus 340 favorite. Now to get him at minus 265, I think is an even more reason to go out there and consider him as a chalk-worthy parlay piece. There you guys go. Chalk or not for UFC Baku. I'll be back tomorrow for the PFL breakdown as well as the quick picks for UFC Baku. See you guys then. Peace.